The ultimatum. The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the enormous hall. Ambassador Daewon walked slowly across the polished floor that stretched for hundreds of meters in every direction. Above him, the ceiling disappeared into darkness while strange lights flickered like distant stars. The chamber was designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. Alien delegates sat on platforms that rose high above the floor there, forms barely visible in the dim lighting. Some were made of crystal that caught and bent light in sharp angles. Others were clouds of gas held together by force fields that glowed with inner fire. The most terrifying were the ones that looked almost human but wrong in ways that made the mind want to look away. Daewon had been to this place many times before, but today felt different. The air itself seemed thick with tension and unspoken threats. Every alien eye was focused on him as he walked to the center of the chamber where a small platform waited for him. The platform was clearly meant for someone much smaller than a human, but Daewon stepped onto it without showing any sign of discomfort. Council leader Vextar rose from his throne-like chair that floated high above the chamber floor. His crystalline body was larger than most buildings on Earth, and when he moved, the light that passed through him created rainbow patterns that hurt to look at directly. His voice came from everywhere, at once deep and powerful like the sound of mountains breaking apart. The charges against humanity were read in a voice that had condemned entire civilizations to destruction. Over the past 10,000 years, human ships had been spotted in sectors that were clearly marked as forbidden zones. Human traders had been using routes that belonged to species who had paid tribute to the Council for millions of years. Human explorers had been asking questions about things that were not meant to be known by such a young and primitive species. Each accusation was delivered with the weight of absolute authority. The Council had ruled the galaxy since before most stars were born. They had brought order to chaos and prevented countless wars by making sure everyone knew their place in the grand scheme of things. Every species had learned to accept the boundaries set by the Council, because the alternative was complete annihilation. But humans were different, and this difference was becoming a serious problem. Captain Hai Jin was mentioned by name as one of the worst offenders. Her exploration ship had been detected in the Outer Veil, a region so dangerous that even the Council's most advanced scouts rarely ventured there. She had not only survived, but had sent back reports that suggested she was mapping the area and planning to establish permanent research stations. Dr. So Young was another human who had caught the Council's attention. Her research teams had been studying alien ruins on worlds that had been sealed off for good reasons. The knowledge contained in those ruins was too dangerous for younger civilizations to understand. Yet she continued her work despite repeated warnings to stay away. Engineer Taemin had been building something in the asteroid belt of the Centauri system. When Council observers tried to investigate, they found energy fields that their sensors could not penetrate. This was impossible according to everything the Council knew about human technology. Yet the humans seemed to be using principles of physics that should have taken them centuries to discover. The pattern was clear across every human colony and outpost. Humans were not just ignoring Council law, they were actively challenging it. They acted as if the rules that governed every other species in the galaxy simply did not apply to them. This kind of behavior had led to the complete destruction of civilizations that were far more advanced than humanity. Vextar leaned forward, and his voice became even more threatening. The Council had been patient with humanity because they were so young and inexperienced, but patience had limits, and those limits had been reached. The time for warnings had passed. Now there would be consequences that would serve as an example to every other species that might consider following humanity's path. The ultimatum was delivered with the same tone that had brought mighty empires to their knees. Humanity had exactly 30 standard days to recall every ship to their home solar system. All human colonies beyond Earth would be abandoned. All human research projects would be terminated immediately. All human contact with other species would cease until the Council decided otherwise. Any human ship found outside the Sol system after the deadline would be destroyed without warning. Any human who attempted to resist would be hunted down across the galaxy. Any human world that refused to comply would be reduced to lifeless rock floating in space. These were not empty threats. The Council had the power to carry them out and had done so many times before, to make sure the message was understood. Vextar showed images of what had happened to the last species that had defied Council authority. The Torak Empire had once controlled dozens of star systems and commanded fleets that numbered in the thousands. They had believed their technology and military might would protect them from Council justice. The images showed what remained of their civilization. Floating debris where once proud cities had stood. Lifeless worlds where billions had lived and worked and dreamed. Dark space where entire star systems had been erased from existence, as if they had never been the Council, had not just defeated the Torak. They had removed every trace that they had ever existed. Ambassador Dewan listened to every word and watched every image with an expression that remained completely calm. This reaction puzzled the alien delegates, who were used to seeing fear and desperation from representatives of condemned species. Some had expected him to fall to his knees and beg for mercy. Others thought he might try to negotiate or offer tribute to buy more time. Instead, Dewan simply nodded when the ultimatum was finished and asked for permission to return to Earth to deliver the Council's message. His voice was steady and respectful, but there was something in his tone that made several of the alien delegates uncomfortable. He spoke as if he were discussing routine business rather than the potential extinction of his entire species. What none of the Council members knew was that every word spoken in the chamber was being transmitted in real time to every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy. Advanced quantum communication systems that should not have existed for centuries were carrying the Council's threats to millions of human ears. The reaction was immediate and uniform across human space. Captain Hyajin received the transmission while her ship was deep in the outer veil, studying phenomena that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. She looked at her crew and saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. They would not be going home. Commander Yunsu was leading a patrol along the edge of Council space when the message reached her ships. Her battle group had been testing new technologies that made their vessels move through space in ways that confused and worried Council observers. She smiled as she heard the ultimatum and ordered her ships to change course deeper into restricted territory. Dr. So Young was examining ancient ruins that held secrets the Council claimed were too dangerous for younger species to understand. She had already unlocked technologies that were revolutionizing human science, and she was just getting started. The Council's threats only convinced her that she was on the right path. Across human space, the response was the same: humanity would not be backing down. They would not be returning to their home system. They would not be abandoning their colonies or their research or their dreams of exploring the galaxy. The Council had made a serious mistake in thinking that humans would react like every other species they had conquered. The 30-day deadline would come and go, but humanity would still be out there among the stars doing exactly what the Council had forbidden them to do. The galaxy was about to learn that some species could not be controlled no matter how much power was used against them. The age of Council dominance was about to end, and it would end because they had tried to cage the one species in the galaxy that refused to accept that. Cages were necessary. The 30-day deadline was still 20 days away when the first reports began reaching the Galactic Council chambers. Human ships were not retreating as expected. Instead, they were moving deeper into forbidden space and doing things that made no sense according to everything the Council knew about human capabilities. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of his mining vessel as it approached the edge of the Forbidden Nebula. His crew worked calmly at their stations, checking systems and preparing equipment as if they were heading to any normal mining operation. The nebula stretched before them like a wall of swirling colors and deadly energy that had killed every explorer who had tried to enter it for the past 1,000,000 years. The Council had placed warning beacons around the nebula in dozens of languages, all saying the same thing. Death waits inside for any who enter. The energy storms within could tear apart the strongest ships ever built. The gravitational anomalies could crush matter down to its basic particles. The radiation levels were so high that even the most advanced shielding would fail within hours. But Minho had been studying the nebula for months, using scanning techniques that his engineers had developed in secret. The energy patterns were not random, as the Council claimed. They followed mathematical rules that could be predicted and used. The gravitational fields were not chaotic, but formed a complex network that could be navigated if you understood the underlying structure. His ship entered the nebula, and immediately sensors throughout Council space began screaming warnings. Every monitoring station detected the impossible human technology was not just surviving in the forbidden nebula but actually using the deadly environment to power their systems. The energy storms that should have destroyed the ship were instead being captured and converted into fuel. Meanwhile, Dr. So Young was setting up research stations on planets that the Council had declared off-limits for millions of years. These worlds contained ruins of ancient civilizations that had possessed technology far beyond anything the current galaxy had ever seen. The Council claimed these ruins were too dangerous to study, and that the knowledge they contained would drive lesser species to madness. But So Young had been studying the ruins for years and had discovered something the Council did not want anyone to know. The ancient civilizations had not been destroyed by their own technology, as the Council claimed. They had been destroyed by the Council itself when they had grown too powerful and independent. The ruins contained not just advanced technology, but also detailed records of the Council's true history. Research teams worked quickly to catalog and copy everything they found before Council forces could stop them. The knowledge they were uncovering was revolutionizing human understanding of physics, engineering, and even biology. Technologies that should have taken centuries to develop were being mastered in months. The gap between human capabilities and Council technology was closing faster than anyone had thought possible. In the asteroid belt of the Centauri system, engineer Taimin was putting the finishing touches on a construction project that had been growing for over a year. The structure was massive, larger than most space stations, but its purpose remained a mystery, even to most of the humans working on it. The energy fields surrounding it were so complex that Council spy probes could not penetrate them. Taimin had been working on this project since the first human ships had encountered Council technology. The humans had quickly realized that the Council's advantage came not just from their advanced science but from their control of information. They knew things about the galaxy that they kept secret from younger species. They used this knowledge to maintain their power and prevent others from growing strong enough to challenge them. The structure Taimin was building would change that balance forever. It was not just a research station or a military base. It was something far more dangerous to the Council, a communication network that could reach every corner of the galaxy instantly and could not be blocked or controlled by any known technology. Commander Yunsu was leading her battle group on what she called routine patrols, but which were actually reconnaissance missions deep into Council territory. Her ships moved through space using principles that made Council military observers nervous. They seemed to exist in multiple places at once and could change direction without regard for the normal rules of physics. The Council had sent their best analysts to study recordings of human ship movements, but no one could explain what they were seeing. The humans were using technology that should not have been possible for a species that had only been in space for 50 years. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, and more efficient than anything in the Council fleet. What made it worse was that the humans were not trying to hide their capabilities. They were openly demonstrating technologies that challenged everything the Council thought they knew about the limits of physics. When Council ships tried to intercept them, the humans would simply vanish and reappear somewhere else, leaving the Council forces looking foolish and confused. The pattern was the same across human space. Instead of retreating, humanity was expanding faster than ever before. New colonies were being established in systems the Council had never even mapped. Human exploration teams were venturing into regions of space that had been considered too dangerous for any civilization to enter. Ambassador Dewan sent regular updates to the Council about humanity's progress, but these messages only made the situation more confusing. He spoke as if humanity was simply following their natural desire to explore and learn. He made no mention of the advanced technology that was making their expansion possible, and showed no concern about the Council's growing anger. The Council tried to understand what was happening by capturing human ships and interrogating their crews, but every attempt failed. Human vessels seemed to know when Council forces were approaching and would either escape or simply disappear entirely. The few humans who were captured claimed to be from colonies that did not appear on any star charts, and possessed knowledge that should not have been available to such a young species. Dr. Kyung-soo was one of the few humans the council managed to capture, but his interrogation only raised more questions. He claimed to be a simple researcher, studying plant life on frontier worlds, but his knowledge of advanced physics and engineering was beyond what most council scientists possessed. When asked about human military capabilities, he would only smile and suggest that the council might want to reconsider their approach. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for this confrontation since their first contact with the council. They had realized immediately that the council's version of galactic order was built on suppression of knowledge and limitation of growth. They had seen what happened to species that tried to advance beyond the boundaries the council set, and had decided that they would not accept those limitations. Every human ship that explored forbidden space was gathering information that would be shared with all of humanity. Every human scientist who studied forbidden knowledge was adding to a growing database of discoveries that was revolutionizing human technology. Every human colony that was established in restricted territory was proving that the council's rules were not laws of nature, but artificial barriers designed to maintain their power. The council had expected humanity to react with fear and submission when faced with their overwhelming power. Instead, they were facing a species that seemed to grow stronger and more confident with each passing day. The 30-day deadline was approaching, but instead of preparing for surrender, humanity was preparing for something the council had never experienced before: complete defiance. The galaxy was about to witness something that had not happened in 10,000 years. A young species was refusing to accept the limitations placed on them by their elders and was proving that those limitations were not necessary. The council had created the rules that governed galactic civilization, but they had never considered what would happen if someone simply refused to follow those rules humanity was about to show them. The 30-day deadline passed without a single human ship returning to Earth. The council chambers erupted in angry voices as reports flooded in from every corner of the galaxy. Human activity had not decreased, but had actually increased dramatically. New human colonies were appearing on worlds that had been forbidden for millions of years. Human ships were operating in the most dangerous regions of space, as if the warnings meant nothing. Council leader Vextar rose from his throne, and his crystalline body blazed with light that hurt to look at directly. His voice echoed through the chamber with the power of a dying star. For 10,000 years, no species had dared to ignore a council ultimatum. The very idea that these primitive humans would continue their defiance was an insult that could not be tolerated. Fleet Admiral Kethrin stepped forward from the military section of the chamber. His species had conquered half a galaxy before joining the council, and his battle experience was legendary. He had personally led the campaigns that destroyed the Torak Empire and reduced their homeworld to cosmic dust. The admiral requested permission to assemble the full council fleet to deal with the human problem permanently. The decision was made quickly and unanimously. Humanity would be made an example that would remind every species in the galaxy why the council rules were never to be questioned. A massive fleet began assembling at the edge of human space. 2,000 warships, representing every major species in the galaxy, converged on a single staging area. The ships that gathered were not just weapons, but symbols of the Council's absolute power. Each vessel was larger than human cities and carried enough firepower to crack planets in half. The smallest ships in the fleet were more advanced than anything humanity had ever built, according to every intelligence report the Council possessed. Admiral Kethrin studied the human colonies and outposts that his scouts had identified. He expected to find massive defensive installations and fleets of warships preparing for a desperate last stand. Instead, his analysts reported something that made no sense at all. Human ships were scattered across dozens of systems, in small groups that seemed to be avoiding any kind of coordinated defense. Captain Ye-jin was spotted leading a group of only 12 ships through the outer edges of the Vega system. When Council scouts tried to engage her small fleet, the human ship simply vanished using some kind of technology that left no trace on any sensors. The scouts searched the entire system, but found nothing, as if the human ships had never existed at all. This pattern repeated across human space. Small groups, of human vessels would appear, engage Council scouts in brief skirmishes, and then disappear completely. The engagements never lasted more than a few minutes, but they left Council commanders frustrated and confused. The humans were not fighting like any species the Council had ever encountered. Dr. Kyung-soo remained the Council's most cooperative human prisoner, and his interrogations continued to provide information that raised more questions than it answered. He claimed that humanity had learned, long ago, not to concentrate their population in a few vulnerable locations. When pressed about human military doctrine, he explained that humans preferred to avoid large battles whenever possible. The Council intelligence services worked frantically to locate Earth or any major human population centers, but every lead ended in dead ends. Human prisoners claimed to be from different worlds, but none of these worlds appeared on any star charts. The humans seemed to have no central government, no military hierarchy, and no unified command structure that could be targeted. This decentralized approach to civilization was something the Council had never encountered before. Every other species they had conquered had clear leadership structures that could be threatened or eliminated. The humans seemed to operate as independent groups that somehow coordinated their actions without any visible communication. Network. Admiral Kethran decided that a demonstration of overwhelming force would bring the humans to their senses. He selected a human research station orbiting a gas giant in the Kepler system. The station appeared defenseless with only a few hundred researchers and no visible weapons. It would serve as a perfect example of what happened to those who defied the Council. The research station was commanded by Dr. Ji-won, a human scientist who had been studying the gas giant's unusual energy patterns. Her work had led to discoveries about quantum mechanics that were revolutionizing human understanding of physics. The Council had tried repeatedly to stop her research, but she had continued working despite their warnings. As the Council fleet approached the research station, Dr. Ji-won transmitted a message that was broadcast across human space. She thanked the Council for providing such an excellent opportunity to test new technology and announced that her team was activating something called the Cascade Protocol. The name meant nothing to Council intelligence services, but the energy readings from the research station immediately began showing impossible results. The station was generating power levels that should have required multiple fusion reactors, but appeared to be drawing energy from the gas giant itself. Using principles that no known science could explain, Admiral Kethran ordered his ships to maintain safe distance, while his scientists studied the energy readings. The humans had clearly developed some kind of new technology, but the Admiral was confident that it would not be enough to stop 2,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships. The first wave of Council ships moved into attack formation and prepared to demonstrate why no species had ever successfully resisted the Council's authority. The weapon systems that had reduced entire civilizations to cosmic dust charged up and targeted the small research station. Dr. Ji-won watched the approaching fleet with calm interest. Her research team continued working at their stations, as if the most powerful military force in the galaxy was not preparing to destroy them. The energy readings from their equipment continued to climb beyond anything the Council observers had ever seen. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when the balance of power in the galaxy shifted permanently. The Council had assembled their greatest fleet to crush human defiance, but they were about to discover that humanity had been preparing for this confrontation in ways that no one could have imagined. The research station that appeared so vulnerable was actually the testing ground for technologies that would redefine what was possible. The scientists who seemed so defenseless were about to demonstrate why the Council had been right to fear human expansion but wrong to think they could stop it. Captain Dong-hyun waited in his fighter squadron hidden in the shadow of one of the gas giant's moons. His ships were equipped with technology that made them invisible to Council sensors, but he knew that invisibility would not be their greatest advantage. The real surprise was what would happen when the Council fleet discovered that their own weapons could be turned against them. The moment of truth was approaching, and the galaxy was about to witness something that had never happened before in 10,000 years of Council rule. A species that refused to be conquered was about to prove that superior technology meant nothing if you did not understand how to use it properly. The Council fleet began its attack, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that they were about to hand humanity the tools needed to free the entire galaxy from their oppressive rule. The weapons they were preparing to use would become the instruments of their own defeat. Dr. Jiwan smiled as she activated the final sequence of the Cascade Protocol. The galaxy was about to change forever. 6 months after the battle at Dr. Jiwan's research station, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The Galactic Council chambers that had once been filled with the voices of rulers commanding trillions of subjects now stood nearly empty. Only a handful of alien delegates remained, and their crystalline forms seemed dimmer than before, as if the light that had once made them appear godlike was slowly fading away. The revolution that followed the Council's defeat had not been led by human armies or human weapons. Instead, it had been driven by something far more powerful than military force. The knowledge that Engineer Taemin had broadcast to every corner of the galaxy had given oppressed civilizations the tools they needed to free themselves. Dr. So Young had become something she never expected to be: a teacher, whose students numbered in the billions. Her research into forbidden technologies was now being shared freely with species that had been denied scientific advancement for millennia. The ancient ruins she had studied contained not just advanced physics and engineering, but also the true history of how the Council had maintained power. The truth was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The Council had not brought order to chaos, as they claimed. Instead, they had created the chaos by suppressing the natural development of younger civilizations. They had destroyed any species that grew too advanced and had rewritten history to make themselves appear as saviors, rather than oppressors. Captain Hyejin found herself leading exploration missions that included representatives from dozens of former Council territories. Her ship, the Pioneer, had become a mobile university where humans worked alongside alien scientists to unlock secrets that had been hidden for thousands of years. The forbidden nebula that had once been considered deadly was now revealed to contain energy sources that could power entire civilizations. The most remarkable change was not in technology, but in the way different species began working together. For 10,000 years, the Council had kept civilizations separated and suspicious of each other. Now, species that had never been allowed to communicate were sharing knowledge and resources. To build something entirely new, Commander Yunsu had transformed her battle group into a peacekeeping force that helped newly liberated worlds defend themselves against the few remaining Council loyalists. Her ships patrolled trade routes that had been reopened for the first time in millennia, allowing commerce and communication to flow freely between worlds that had been isolated for generations. The former Council territories did not become a human empire, as some had feared. Instead, they formed loose confederations based on mutual cooperation and shared interests. Worlds that specialized in agriculture traded with those that excelled in manufacturing, while species with advanced medical knowledge shared their discoveries with civilizations that had been denied proper healthcare. Ambassador Daewon had become something like a galactic diplomat, helping to negotiate agreements between species that were learning to work as equals rather than subjects. The skills he had developed during years of dealing with Council arrogance now served him well in building bridges between civilizations that had different needs and capabilities. Captain Minho had discovered that the Forbidden Nebula contained resources beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. The energy storms that the Council claimed were deadly were actually quantum phenomena that could be harvested to provide clean, unlimited power. His mining operations had become research centers where human and alien scientists worked together to develop new forms of energy production. The technology sharing that had begun with Taemin's broadcast had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of hoarding knowledge to maintain advantage over rivals, civilizations were freely exchanging discoveries that benefited everyone. Species that had been enemies for millions of years were now collaborating on projects that advanced their mutual understanding. Dr. Kyung-soo had been released from Council custody and had returned to his research with renewed purpose. His studies of plant life on frontier worlds had led to agricultural breakthroughs that were feeding billions of beings on worlds that had been starving under Council rule. The simple researcher who had once been dismissed as unimportant was now helping to transform entire ecosystems. The few remaining council members gathered in their empty chambers to try to understand what had gone wrong. Fleet Admiral Kethran had lost more than just a battle. He had witnessed the complete collapse of everything he had believed about military power and technological superiority. His fleet had been defeated not by superior weapons, but by principles of physics that turned strength into weakness. Council leader Vextar sat alone on his throne, his crystalline body now dim and fractured like a broken mirror. The power that had once commanded the obedience of trillions was gone, not because it had been taken by force, but because it had been made irrelevant. The galaxy no longer needed rulers who maintained order through fear and suppression. The question that haunted every remaining council member was simple and devastating. How had humanity developed technology that surpassed civilizations millions of years older in just a few decades? The answer came from an unexpected source, Dr. Jiwan, who had agreed to meet with the former council leaders to explain what had happened. Her explanation was both simple and profound. Humanity had succeeded not because they were smarter or more advanced than other species, but because they had never accepted that limitations were permanent. Every barrier the council had placed in their path had been seen as a challenge to overcome rather than a law of nature to obey. Other species had been taught for thousands of generations that certain things were impossible, that some knowledge was too dangerous, and that progress beyond council-approved limits would lead to destruction. Humans had looked at these same limitations and had asked a different question, not whether something was allowed, but whether it was actually impossible. The technology that had defeated the council fleet was not based on secret weapons or advanced engineering. It was built on the simple refusal to accept that problems could not be solved. Every human scientist, engineer, and explorer had approached the universe with the assumption that there was always a better way to do things. Captain Ye Jin had developed ships that moved through space in impossible ways because she had never been told that such movement was impossible. Captain Donghyun had created weapons that manipulated reality because no one had convinced him that reality could not be changed. Engineer Taemin had built communication networks that connected the entire galaxy because he had not accepted that such connections were beyond reach. The galaxy that emerged from humanity's intervention was unrecognizable from the static-controlled realm the council had maintained. Species that had never been allowed to leave their home. Systems were now exploring distant galaxies. Technologies that had been suppressed for being too dangerous were being developed safely through methods that humans had perfected. Most importantly, the idea that any single authority could control the destiny of trillions of beings had been permanently shattered. The council had ruled through fear and ignorance, but humanity had shown that knowledge freely shared was more powerful than any weapon. As Captain Minho continued his work in the former Forbidden Nebula, he reflected on humanity's unintended role as galactic liberators. They had not set out to free the galaxy from oppression. They had simply refused to accept the limitations that others took for granted. In doing so, they had demonstrated that the only real barriers to progress were those imposed by fear and accepted through habit. The new galaxy was vast and full of possibilities that no one had dared to imagine. The age of council dominance was over, and the age of unlimited exploration had begun. The first volley from the council fleet lit up space like a newborn star. Thousands of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked toward Dr. Jiwan's research station with enough destructive power to vaporize entire moons. Admiral Kethran watched from his command ship, confident that this demonstration would finally show humanity the futility of resisting council authority. What happened next defied every law of physics that the council thought they understood. The energy weapons struck the research station, but instead of destroying it, the beams seemed to be absorbed by invisible fields around the structure. The plasma torpedoes hit barriers that should not have existed, and their explosive energy was captured and redirected in ways that made council scientists stare at their instruments in disbelief. Gar Jiwan stood calmly in her station's control center, watching displays that showed energy levels climbing far beyond anything her equipment should have been able to handle. The Cascade Protocol was working perfectly. Her team had spent months studying the quantum fields that surrounded the gas giant and had learned to manipulate them in ways that turned incoming attacks into sources of power. The absorbed energy from the Council weapons was not just being stored but was being amplified and focused back toward the attacking fleet. The research station had become a mirror that reflected the Council's own firepower with mathematical precision. Every beam that struck, the station was returned with double. The original power aimed directly at the ship that had fired it. The first Council ships to be hit by their own reflected weapons were caught completely off guard. Their shields had been designed to protect against enemy attacks, not against their own weapons fired back at them with increased intensity. Explosions began rippling through the front ranks of the Council fleet as ships were destroyed by their own firepower. Admiral Kethron ordered his ships to cease fire, but the damage was already done. The Cascade Protocol had absorbed enough energy to power a small star, and Dr. G1's team was now in complete control of that power. The research station began firing beams of pure energy that cut through Council ships like a sword through paper. Captain Dong-hyun chose that moment to reveal his hidden squadron. The fighter ships that had been invisible in the gas giant's shadow suddenly appeared throughout the Council fleet, moving in patterns that seemed to ignore the basic laws of motion. His ships existed in multiple locations at the same time, striking targets with weapons that fired faster than light itself. The Council fleet found itself under attack from directions that should have been impossible. Dong-hyun's fighters moved through space as if distance and time were suggestions rather than absolute limits. They would appear beside a Council battleship, fire a devastating salvo, and then vanish before return fire could reach them, only to reappear on the opposite side of the fleet seconds later. What terrified the Council commanders most was the impossible coordination between human forces. The research station and the fighter squadron were working together with precision that suggested instantaneous communication across vast distances. Dr. Ji-won would target a Council ship's shields with her energy beams, and Captain Dong-hyun would strike the exact moment the shields failed. Meanwhile, Engineer Taemin's mysterious construction project in the Centauri system finally revealed its true purpose. The massive structure that had been hidden behind impenetrable energy fields suddenly came online and began broadcasting signals that reached every corner of the galaxy. In real time, the signals were not just communications but information packets containing detailed technical data. Every oppressed species in the galaxy suddenly found themselves receiving blueprints for advanced technology, tactical information about Council fleet weaknesses, and coordinates for secret supply depots and military installations. The information was being transmitted using quantum entanglement networks that could not be blocked or intercepted by any known method. The effect was immediate and devastating. Civilizations that had been slaves to the Council for millennia suddenly possessed the knowledge they needed to break free. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources learned how to build weapons that could destroy the ships that had oppressed them. Species that had been forbidden to travel beyond their home systems received star charts and navigation data for the entire galaxy. Commander Yun-Su's battle group had been waiting for this moment. Her ships had been positioned at 17 different strategic locations throughout Council space, and the moment Taemin's broadcast began, she launched simultaneous attacks on the Council's most important facilities. Her ships struck supply depots that had been secret for thousands of years, destroying stockpiles of weapons and equipment that would have taken decades to replace. Communication centers that coordinated Council operations across the galaxy went silent as human weapons reduced them to expanding clouds of debris. Military academies where Council officers had trained for centuries were eliminated in coordinated strikes that left no survivors. The precision of the attacks was what made them so devastating. Yun-Su's ships knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. They had detailed intelligence about every facility they attacked and used weapons that were specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses of Council technology. Back at the research station, Dr. Ji-won was coordinating a defensive operation that was rewriting military history. Her small team of scientists was holding off the largest fleet ever assembled, using principles of physics that turned the Council's own power against them. The energy absorption and redirection system was working so efficiently that every Council attack only made the human defenses stronger. The Council fleet was caught in a trap of their own making. Every weapon they fired was absorbed and used to power more devastating counterattacks. The more they tried to destroy the research station, the more powerful it became. Admiral Kethron found himself commanding a fleet that was literally destroying itself with its own weapons. Captain Yejin appeared at that moment leading her small squadron in an attack that demonstrated the true extent of human technological advancement. Her 12 ships moved through the Council fleet like predators among prey, using weapons that seemed to rewrite reality itself. Council ships that were struck by Yejin's weapons did not just explode, they seemed to fold in on themselves as if space and time were being manipulated at the quantum level. Entire battleships would simply cease to exist, leaving behind only empty space where massive vessels had been moments before. The battle that was supposed to demonstrate Council superiority had become a showcase for human capabilities that defied everything. The galaxy thought it knew about the limits of technology. The research station continued to grow more powerful with each attack, while human squadrons struck at targets throughout the fleet with impossible precision. Admiral Kethron realized that his fleet was not just losing the battle, but was actively contributing to its own destruction. Every shot fired at the humans was making them stronger, while his own ships were being eliminated by weapons they could not understand or defend against. Dr. Kyung-soo had been right when he suggested that the Council should reconsider their approach. Humanity had not just prepared for this confrontation, they had turned it into an opportunity to demonstrate that the Council's 10,000-year dominance was ending. The galaxy was witnessing the birth of a new age where the rules that had governed civilization for millennia were being rewritten by a species that refused to accept limitations. The Council fleet that had been assembled to crush human defiance was instead becoming the instrument of their own defeat. The backfire had begun, and there would be no stopping it.